Hey guys, I just want to talk to you guys today about sunsetting. You'll see some PvP gameplay in the background. It's just background stuff for now. But really, I wanted to talk about the big question here: is sunsetting the right solution? Are we doing it for the right reasons? Is it the only way? And I'm going to focus particularly on weapons in this case. I kind of do think that, we need to accept the idea that armor is going to be a relatively seasonal grind. I do think that they could make the mod slot for armor longer. So maybe instead of the season before and the season after, maybe it's a couple of seasons in both directions. But I do think that the armor grind is going to be something that Bungie is going to want to put their foot down on. Just because of wanting to have things that people do need to go back and grind, and based on the random rolls that they've done in armors and stuff like that. So with that, let's go ahead and just chat about some of the things that have been said around the community. Let's start with other games do it. Right? Other games do the same thing, and so this is the only way. This is the way that it works for other games, and so we should just use that. So for one, I think what you'll find, and I'll show it to you in a little bit more depth here in a second, is that in other games, sunsetting works because their gear is fundamentally different. With the way that sunsetting, or the same idea of sunsetting, works in games like World of Warcraft and things like that, which are commonly mentioned when they talk about other MMOs do this thing. It's entirely different because in games like World of Warcraft, you don't care about your armor. I can't even tell you a single name of any piece of my armor, or even my weapons for that matter. And so the reason why is you just don't care. Everything's a stat 6, so it just doesn't matter. And I think that part of the reason why Destiny is so good is because when people talk about certain weapons like the Spare Rations and the Recluse, they're referencing it by name, and that name means something, and that's an awesome thing. In World of Warcraft, when I get a new weapon, I say, the weapon has higher DPS numbers, so that's what I use. I don't know what the name of it is because I have the best numbered one that I have. It has the highest number in this one section, so therefore I use it. And it's so boring, and it's so, I don't know, it's just, to me, it's something that Destiny has that other games don't have. And I think that that's something is worth protecting for the future. Okay, so what you guys are looking at right here is actually a picture of my character in World of Warcraft. I have a lot of days played in this game, over 300 days of actual gameplay time, and so I can tell you with absolute certainty that what I'm telling you is going to be, the majority of people that play any MMO like this. And so what you'll see in this image is that my gloves that we're currently looking at, they have an agility value, a stamina value, a haste value, versatility, and speed values. Now, when you're picking your best gear, the reason why you don't know the name of any of them, or it doesn't matter the name of any of them, or even, we don't even care about the looks of them, is because it doesn't matter. So for this piece of gear here, I pick whichever piece has the most agility and versatility, and that's the reason why I pick this gloves. It has nothing to do with the fact that they look cool or anything like that, and they don't affect my gameplay whatsoever, right? So as you can see, everything's literally just a stat stick, and weapons are no different. That's the reason why I showed you armor, is because weapons are also exactly the same. Weapons are literally just a DPS value, and then an agility value, and then the secondary stat values like versatility and haste, like I was showing you before. So the fact that in Destiny you have weapons and things that are iconic and things that people reference by name, that's a huge thing. And in World of Warcraft, the only time we've ever had that have been legendaries, which take significantly longer to get, and they take whole raid groups that work together, essentially making these like crazy, crazy cool items. Um, but every item in Destiny is like that. Every item, when you talk about the bug out bag, or the 21% delirium, or the outrageous fortune, like these are all things that we know, and they're just abundant everywhere. Like everyone has a story that they could tell about the weapons that they have, and that's a fantastic thing that we have never seen and never will see in a game like World of Warcraft. Something else I want to mention too is these gloves that you're seeing. They're the highest level gear that I can get for that raid tier, and typically raid tiers last about 9 months, so I wouldn't normally plan on replacing them for 9 months. Whereas the gear that we have, armor, right, included and stuff, while yeah, it might last the same amount of time, the time that it took for me to get a static rolled piece of gloves like that is way, way less than what it would take to get a randomly rolled god roll. And I think that that should definitely be considered as well. So I've been talking about, people referencing weapons by name and stuff like that. But why is that so important? And the reason why is because when you're looking at weapons in Destiny, specifically weapons, right? Not as much armor, to a certain extent, there is, but with weapons, there is a feel to each weapon. You might like the recoil, you might like your stability, it might have a good amount of aim assist for you, it might just feel good, it might just feel crispy and snappy. And so when you talk about the way a weapon feels, in my opinion, that's like the peak level of picking and making your loadout. In World of Warcraft, I've never once even remotely thought about like any weapon as much as I do in Destiny. And the reason why is because when you look at your weapons in an MMO like World of Warcraft, they're literally just that number. And if it doesn't have a bigger number, you don't use it. But in Destiny, there's been times where I will purposely use a suboptimal loadout because I like the way the weapon feels, which is so freaking cool. I can go out of my way and I can use an Austringer instead of a spare rations, and I can still do really well with it. Is it gonna, absolutely compete at the very top of PvP, of equal skill level? No. There are things that are better and there are things that are worse, but that's the same way as it will be in any game that has any competitive scene whatsoever. There will always be a best thing, and that doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that, like, you get to care about your weapons that may not be the best thing. If you're tired of using Recluse, just stop using Recluse, man. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't need to be a crazy thing. I get where World First Raiders and stuff are, tired of always having to use the same loadout, and I do. I totally get that. But at the same time, like, if it wasn't Recluse, if it wasn't Mountaintop, it's just gonna be something else. And even this system of sunsetting doesn't change that. Everyone will still be running the same weapons when we get the next raid, because they'll have gotten them this season, before the season even started, or they'll farm it before the raid unlocks or whatever. Like, there's gonna be best things, there's gonna be best archetypes, there's gonna be best weapons, there's gonna be best perks, there will be, and there always will be. And like, sunsetting doesn't affect any of that. The only thing that sunsetting does is it makes you put away things that you have previously gone out of your way, or even, just happenstance got. And that is like only one reason why sunsetting is really not, it's not working. It's not a solid idea, at least not yet. And as we move forward and looking at stuff, another reason why sunsetting isn't working is these reissued weapons. I am looking at a piece of like just a notepad that I had And looking at all of these weapons that I myself have gotten, I've gotten reissues so far of over 10 weapons. And these reissues, I double checked on LightGG, and they do not have any new perks. They include Main Ingredient, Outrageous Fortune, Lonesome, Wishbringer, Steel Sibley Z14, Long Shadow, Gnawing Hunger, Night Watch, Bad Omens, and a lot of extra other stuff, right? And like a lot of that, I'm sure you guys are aware, is like Gambit, Vanguard, PvP gear. So we're looking at these reissued weapons that you're going to be literally regrinding for the same exact perks. This is not a good system. In no world is this a good or fun system. And in fact, we actually recently dealt with this in World of Warcraft. And let me tell you, it was enough to kill an entire expansion for us. Regrinding the same gear that you already had will kill the game. And we really need to be a lot louder about this to Bungie. I know that people will just say, well, you know, it only affects the pinnacle level of stuff. But that doesn't change the fact that you're literally grinding again for something you already had. Why do you need to spend the time and the effort to regrind something you already had to only use in a small portion of the game? That thought process is fundamentally flawed. And we should not move forward under the assumption that, you know, better things are going to come. They might come. They might, you know, and the new Dark Drinker and the new Boltcaster swords have been a really nice surprise. However, I would say that the rest of the gear so far has been pretty mediocre or could have lived in the sandbox that we currently had, right? Cold Denial would have been just fine in an unsunsetting world. There's nothing here that would have been too powerful to, you know, live and not be sunset eventually. And even the swords that we have, right? They're really powerful, but they're really powerful because the swords we had before were really bad, right? They're like the swords we had before weren't good. And so bringing back these old exotic swords in a legendary fashion, yeah, they're going to feel powerful and they're going to be really good. And it really makes the old swords obsolete. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for an archetype that nobody was really using anyway. So I guess my last comment is more of a question to you guys and to Bungie, you know, the greater Destiny community. Are things really so complicated right now that we have to have something like sunsetting? I think realistically, if people really thought about it for a second, you'd realize that that's not the case. When we talk about power creep and things like that, what is it that you could possibly stack in this game that would make you so OP? It would be a combination of things like Oppressive Darkness, maybe a damage dealing perk like 1-2 punch, and then maybe an exotic, right? And then maybe you have like Weapons of Light on top of that. So we're talking about like 4 separate things that are working together. Are 4 things working together so powerful that there's just no coming back and we have to like get rid of these old weapons? I really don't think so. I really don't think that like this false narrative that we have to just sunset because there's no other way to save ourselves from power creep and there's no other way to save the game's longevity is just like ridiculous. We shouldn't just be accepting these half-baked solutions. Like, sunsetting isn't gonna work. It doesn't work now, and it's not gonna work in the future. If things were gonna be different in the future, you would just pick up the new weapon, right? If things are gonna be more powerful and that's why they need to be able to sunset stuff, you're just gonna pick that up. You don't need it to be sunset. You don't need your old gear to be sunset if the new stuff that's coming out is going to be cool. And quite frankly, Bungie doesn't need the security blanket of saying, oh, well, if we introduce something so powerful that we, can't figure out how to fix it, that, it'll get sunset eventually and the problem will take care of itself. That's taking the easy way out. Like, there are things like Mountaintop right now, which are still honestly too powerful and need to be reined in. But Bungie shouldn't just be like, well, you know, it'll get sunsets, so it won't be an issue. It'll still be an issue. It's still gonna be an issue in all kinds of content, just not the pinnacle content. And that's like it's not even a band-aid, honestly. It's just it feels, at least to me as a software developer, it feels to me like it's just really short-sighted. Like, we have a problem, we're not sure what the fix is. We've done sort of sunsetting before in the past for D1 and, for early D2. But even then, early D2, like, you wanted those mod slots, you wanted those random rolls. That's why you don't use the old static rolled stuff anymore. And, like, we got to pick that, right? When you give up your weapons that you've grown so fond of over the years, and maybe you are looking at a spare rations, or maybe, some other gun, you should be willing and wanting to give that up for something better. And if nothing else better comes along, it shouldn't be a tax on you as the player, right? You shouldn't feel like, oh, well, there's Bungie's taking away my gear, so I guess I have to go farm the same thing over again, so that way I can keep using it. It shouldn't be a tax on the player because Bungie doesn't have a better solution for this kind of stuff. And I think that Bungie really needs to start looking at the idea of, calling themselves an MMORPG. There's so many more cool and amazing things that they could go into with that RPG aspect that they just haven't yet. And maybe they will. These new swords are giving me hope that maybe they will eventually go more into that. Maybe they'll have guns that have perks that heal. Maybe, on a certain amount of headshot hits, you'll release like a healing pulse or something like that. Lumina was a step in the right direction. These swords being a little more unique in how they play and being legendaries, another good step in the right direction. But they're all just steps. And, like, unless they take that jump, they're not going to get there. So again, I really want to ask you guys, do you really feel like sunsetting is the only way? Do you feel like there's really nothing else? And are you happy with just getting the same thing over again because Bungie just doesn't know what to do? I don't want to criticize Bungie here. They're doing the best that they can, but it doesn't mean that their solutions are always good, right? Armor 2.0 was a perfect example of this. Armor 2.0 had a lot of flaws. The elemental affinity system was broken from the very start. And it's taken people a lot longer to get used to the idea. But now that people are used to the idea, it's kind of too late, right? The system's been flawed for so long that people just stop questioning whether or not the system is good. But I think it's really important to be thinking about, why does this system exist? Is it the right move? Could there be something better? Because I think most of the time you'll find that there could be a better solution. And personally, I think that, living in a day and age where we as players of Destiny have to regrind the same weapons for the same perks, and, with each one making those god rolls less and less fun to obtain, I just think that Destiny is just going to be a worse game. And I don't know that there is any way that they could tune sunsetting to make that any better. If they just needed a temporary fix, maybe something they could do is they could say, hey, the next year of weapons, you're going to have the artifact perks for weapons, like anti-barrier and stuff like that. There'll be a slot for that in your weapons. Like, maybe that could buy them enough time where they could really flesh out this idea. But sunsetting in its current implementation is not working, and I don't think it will. And they need to really think about what they want to do in the future for their game. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. And if you guys have any questions or any comments or anything, feel free to put them down below. Have a good one, guys. Peace out.